It started with a car crash. A young woman, barely 20, who everyone in Izena's church had known. One Sunday, after Pastor Izena laid his hands on her and declared her blessed beyond measure, she drove off to visit her family and never made it back alive. Her car flipped on a quiet road, bursting into flames, and she was gone. The congregation was shaken. Pastor Izena held a vigil, urging everyone to pray for her soul, his voice heavy with sorrow. He prayed loudly, passionately, as if her loss hurt him deeply. But that was only the first of the strange deaths. A few weeks later, it was a young father of two who had come to Izena for prayer after a job loss. Izena had prayed fervently for him, promising him new beginnings. Days later, the man's house caught fire in the middle of the night, trapping him inside. His wife and children barely escaped. As the congregation mourned another loss, a pattern started to form, though most people dismissed it, not wanting to believe something so dark. Only Kalu, Izena's younger brother, noticed the unsettling trend. Kalu was a pastor too, in a smaller, less glamorous church not far from Izena's. He started to wonder if these weren't just tragic coincidences. But how could he bring up something like this to his brother? Was it even possible? Several months earlier, before these tragic deaths, things had been different. Izena and Kalu were just two brothers trying to serve God. But their ministries couldn't have looked more different. While Izena had his sights set on growing his church into a megachurch, Kalu was content with his small but steady congregation, focusing on preaching the gospel and helping those in need. However, as time passed, Izena grew frustrated. He saw his friends, men like Pastor Obina and Pastor Uche, leading churches packed with people, offering praise and donations at every service. These men drove luxury cars, lived in large homes, and were even called to speak on TV. Meanwhile, Izena's congregation barely filled half the room on a good Sunday. They struggled to pay for church repairs, and he had to preach in worn-out robes. One evening after service, Izena's frustration spilled over during a conversation with Kalu. "Kalu," he said, pacing the floor, "don't you ever wonder why we work so hard and yet have so little to show for it?" Kalu, seated calmly by the altar, shrugged. "I'm happy with what God has given me. Isn't that enough?" Izena frowned. "It's not enough for me. I look around and I see our friends, people we went to seminary with, living like kings. They have thousands flocking to hear them preach. Why shouldn't we have that?" Kalu shifted uncomfortably. "Izena, you know God's work isn't about fame or riches. Those things can be distractions. We're here to serve, not to be worshipped." But Izena wasn't convinced. He'd grown up in the same small community as Kalu, where their parents had struggled to put food on the table. They had dreamed together of becoming pastors, of changing lives. But now, he was beginning to question if simply serving was enough. What good was it if no one noticed their hard work? Later that night, Izena knelt and prayed. He poured out his heart to God, asking why he was being left behind. He wanted to lead a great congregation. He wanted people to recognize his gifts, to see him as a powerful pastor. "Lord," he whispered, "make me as successful as the others. Help me to do great things." But the answer that came to him was not what he wanted to hear. "Be patient, my son," the voice seemed to say. "Stay faithful. Do not be in a hurry." Izena clenched his fists, his frustration growing. He wanted more than this slow journey. He wanted his ministry to blossom, to be known. That night he couldn't sleep. The seed of discontent had taken root in his heart, and he knew he had to find another way. In the days that followed, Izena began asking around. He approached Pastor Obina after a large regional conference, catching him as he stepped out of his luxury car. "Obina," Izena started, struggling to keep his voice steady. How did you make it? Your ministry, has grown so fast. People say you've been blessed beyond imagination." Obina looked at him closely, as if considering something. Then, with a sly smile, he replied, "Izena, there are some blessings that don't come from just waiting around." Izena's heartbeat quickened. "What do you mean?" Obina's smile widened, but his eyes were cold. "It's not something everyone can handle. Let's just say, you'd have to be willing to give something up. Something precious. Izena was both intrigued and alarmed. He remembered Obina's transformation, from a humble pastor to one who seemed to walk with an aura of power and mystery. There was something about him that was almost otherworldly. But Izena's desire for success clouded his caution. "Tell me more," he insisted. Obina leaned in, his voice low. "There's a group. They offer help, guidance. They have powers that can make your dreams come true. You'd have everything you desire, a large congregation, wealth, recognition. But you must be ready to make sacrifices." Izena was hooked. "What kind of sacrifices?" Obina's gaze darkened. "First, you'd need to give something close, something dear to you, a blood sacrifice to show your commitment. After that, it's a yearly duty. You'll offer 10 of your own flock, 10 church members every year. It's a small price for a lifetime of greatness." Izena felt a chill down his spine, but he swallowed it down. 10 members every year? He hesitated. The words felt heavy and terrifying. "Yes," Obina replied, his voice smooth. "But imagine the power you'll have. Imagine the wealth, the fame." Izena thought of Kalu, of their small church struggling each week. He thought of his friends with their full houses, expensive clothes, and devoted followers. He was tired of being small, of going unnoticed. But could he go that far? Days passed, but Izena couldn't let go of Obina's words. Kalu noticed his brother's distance, his constant distractions. One evening, after their service, Kalu finally approached him. "Izena," he said quietly, "is something wrong?" Izena shook his head quickly, forcing a smile. "No, nothing. Just a lot on my mind." "You've been acting strange, brother." Kalu pressed, his gaze steady. "I feel like you're drifting away. Whatever it is, I hope you're not thinking of abandoning the path God has set for us." Izena's smile faded. "Kalu, not everything is about waiting endlessly on God. Sometimes you have to make your own way." The words came out more defensively than he intended. Kalu's eyes filled with concern. "You know that's not true, Izena. God's timing is perfect. Don't let impatience lead you down a path you can't return from." Izena felt a flash of anger. "Not all of us are content to live like beggars. Kalu, I want more than this." The sharpness in his voice startled them both. For a moment, Kalu just stared, hurt and confused. He didn't push further, but a heavy silence settled between them. After that night, Izena stopped listening to his brother's warnings. He met Obina again and agreed to the terms, and finally agreed to sacrifice his brother. That night, Izena was in his dimly lit shrine, his hands trembling as he prepared to do the unthinkable. The smell of incense hung heavy in the air, mingling with the faint echoes of distant chants whispered by the cloaked figures who stood at a distance, watching him. It was a small, dark room with walls covered in strange symbols. Candles flickered in a circle around him, casting long shadows that twisted and moved as if they were alive. Izena's heart pounded, torn between fear and ambition. He tried to steady his hands as he placed a small carved idol at the center of the altar. He knew what was required. This ritual was to be a blood sacrifice, something Obina had told him about. To gain the powers he so desperately wanted, he had to offer a life close to him, someone dear to him. And in his heart, he knew that meant Kalu. Kalu had been nothing but good to him, nothing but loyal, always by his side. Yet, here he was, preparing to betray him for the promise of power and recognition. Izena closed his eyes, wrestling with the guilt that clawed at him, but he pushed it down, telling himself it was for the greater good. After all, he thought, weren't they both serving God in their own ways? Couldn't his newfound fame bring people to the faith? The other members of the cult urged him forward. Their leader, an elder man with a deep, gravelly voice, whispering from behind his hooded robe, "Now, Izena. The time is now. His spirit will fuel your rise." Izena tightened his grip on the small knife in his hand, muttering the words he'd memorized earlier. A strange warmth filled the room, as if some unseen presence were wrapping itself around him. He could feel the energy, dark and alluring, urging him to take the final step. "Kalu, my brother," Izena whispered, almost choking on the words. "This is my only path to greatness. Meanwhile, Kalu lay in his small room, unaware of the danger gathering against him. But as he drifted to sleep, a sharp feeling of unease washed over him. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. He could feel it, a prickling fear that crept up his spine, and without understanding why, he sat up in bed, his heart racing. "Kalu," he whispered to himself, "get up and pray." It was a strange urge, but he had always trusted the Spirit's guidance. He knelt by his bed, pressing his hands together tightly, and began to pray. At first, he didn't know what to say, so he simply asked God to cover him and his family, to protect them from any harm. But as he prayed, the image of his brother's face appeared in his mind, and a deep sorrow filled his heart. "Lord," he prayed, "whatever is going on, protect Izena. Protect me. Cover us with your blood. Shield us from any attack." As he spoke, his voice grew stronger, his faith pushing back against the dark feeling in his chest. He could feel something, an unseen resistance, almost as if he were in the middle of a battle. He prayed with even greater fervor, calling on God's power to shield him from any forces that might be lurking in the darkness. Back at the shrine, Izena was unaware of Kalu's prayers. His voice cracked as he repeated the final incantation, but just as he was about to drive the knife into the effigy representing Kalu, a powerful jolt of energy erupted, sending him staggering back. He stumbled, gasping for breath, as if an invisible wall had risen between him and the altar. What's happening?" he asked, looking to the cult elder in confusion. The elder narrowed his eyes, his voice now harsh. "Someone is blocking the ritual. His spirit is resisting, protected by something powerful." Izena's face twisted in frustration. "No, this must happen. I need this to happen." He tried again, summoning all his energy, gripping the knife so hard his knuckles turned white. But each time he attempted to complete the ritual, he was thrown back, as if an unseen force shielded Kalu from his reach. "Impossible," the elder muttered. "He is covered in prayer." The other cult members murmured in frustration, but the elder signaled for them to be silent. "This is not the end. If you cannot offer your brother's soul," he said, his voice a harsh whisper, "there are other options. But the sacrifice must be made soon." Izena's mind raced, desperate for a solution. He remembered his parents. Their once strong faith had waned over the years, and they were now elderly and fragile. He knew they still prayed, but their strength was not what it used to be. If Kalu was protected, perhaps his parents wouldn't be. After a long, heavy silence, he nodded. "I'll do it. I'll use them." The elder nodded approvingly. "Prepare yourself. Their spirits will open doors you cannot imagine." The next morning, Izena struggled to meet Kalu's gaze. His brother had greeted him with warmth, completely unaware of what had transpired. Kalu had the same trusting, open smile as always, and Izena felt a pang of guilt so sharp it almost stopped him from going through with his plan. Almost. Kalu patted him on the shoulder. "Are you all right, Izena? You look tired." Izena forced a smile. "Just a long night. That's all." He quickly looked away, feeling the weight of his lies. He couldn't bring himself to face Kalu's eyes for long, afraid his guilt would show. That evening, under the cover of darkness, he returned to the shrine. He placed items that belonged to their parents, a strand of his mother's hair, an old handkerchief of his father's, on the altar, following the ritual instructions. His hands trembled, but he pushed down his feelings, focusing on the promise of power, of fame, and of finally escaping the shadow he felt had held him back. This time, there was no resistance. The ritual proceeded smoothly, and as he finished, a strange calm settled over him. He felt stronger, more sure of himself, as if some invisible weight had lifted from his shoulders. In his heart, he knew his parents would not live to see another day. When the news came the following morning, Kalu was shattered. Their parents had both passed away in their sleep, suddenly and without any warning. The doctors could find no clear cause, calling it a tragic coincidence. But Kalu didn't believe in coincidence, not like this. In his grief, Kalu turned to Izena, expecting to find the same heartbreak in his brother's eyes. But to his shock, Izena was calm, almost detached, offering a few words of comfort before quickly leaving to prepare for the next service. The funeral was quiet, attended by only a few family friends and church members. Kalu was devastated, his heart broken, but even in his pain, he couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was happening beneath the surface, something he didn't yet understand. The transformation in Izena's life after his parents' death was swift and unmistakable. Within weeks, his church began to grow, filling with people drawn to his powerful sermons and miraculous healings. He laid hands on the sick, and they claimed to be healed. People came with burdens, and he lifted them with a single prayer. His fame spread quickly, and soon he was the pastor everyone wanted to see, the man with a supposed gift that seemed almost too good to be true. Kalu watched from a distance, both worried and confused. He knew his brother's church was flourishing, but every time he tried to approach Izena, security guards or assistants blocked his way. His own brother, once so close, now seemed like a stranger behind a wall of power and fame. As months passed, Izena's life transformed entirely. He married a beautiful woman from the congregation, bought a luxurious home, and drove expensive cars. People praised him, calling him a man of faith, a healer, a miracle worker. Izena drank in the admiration, each success driving him further down the path he'd chosen. But Kalu couldn't shake the feeling that something dark lay at the heart of it all. And then the mysterious deaths began. One by one, members of Izena's congregation started dying under strange circumstances. Each one had recently received prayer or healing from Izena, and each one had died suddenly. One in a car accident, another in a fire, another from an unexplained illness. It was as if a shadow followed Izena's miracles, taking lives wherever he went. Kalu watched helplessly, unable to ignore the pattern. He knew Izena had changed, but he couldn't understand why or how. He prayed night after night, asking God for answers, for a way to reach his brother before it was too late. And yet, Izena seemed oblivious to the trail of death that followed him. To him, it was a small price for the success he had gained. He pushed aside any guilt, telling himself that these tragedies were out of his hands. After all, wasn't he bringing people closer to God? Didn't his miracles prove that he was chosen, special, meant for greatness? The deaths became whispers among the congregation, quiet murmurs that something was not right. But Izena's fame protected him. No one dared to question the man who seemed to walk with divine power. As the year neared its end, Izena knew he had one more task, one final sacrifice to meet the cult's requirement and renew his power for the coming year. He began scanning his congregation, identifying potential victims. To him, they were just numbers, a necessary step in maintaining his strength and reputation. But Kalu had started piecing things together. He noticed that each victim was someone close to Izena, someone he had prayed over or promised healing. Driven by both grief and suspicion, he began his own quiet investigation, praying and researching the lives of those who had passed. Finally, after weeks of careful study, Kalu identified a likely target, a middle-aged woman named Ada who had come to Izena recently for healing. Kalu sensed that she would be next, and the thought chilled him to his core. The night before the planned ritual, Kalu went to Ada's house, knocking on her door urgently. She opened it, surprised to see him at such an hour. "Kalu, what's wrong?" she asked, concerned. "Ada, please," he began, his voice low and intense. "I need to pray for you. You might be in danger." Ada hesitated, confused by his urgency, but something in his eyes convinced her to let him in. Together, they prayed through the night, asking God for protection. Kalu poured out his heart, feeling the weight of the battle he was fighting not only for Ada but also for his brother's soul. When Izena arrived at the shrine later that night, ready to perform the sacrifice, he was met with an unexpected resistance. As he began the ritual, he felt a sudden, searing pain shoot through him, as if a wall had been raised between him and his intended target. "What is this?" he gasped, stumbling back. The cult elder's face twisted in anger. "Someone has prayed over her. She's protected." Izena cursed under his breath, frustration and fear filling him. His power was slipping, and he needed one more sacrifice to maintain his standing. He couldn't fail now, not when he had come this far. He would need to find another victim, quickly. Meanwhile, Kalu watched and waited, knowing in his heart that the battle was far from over. He had come close to exposing his brother's secret, but he knew Ezena wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. And as the new year loomed, Kalu prepared himself for the fight of his life. A battle for his brother's soul, and perhaps his own. Ezena sat alone in his office, staring blankly at his desk, the words from the cult leader echoing in his mind. 10 souls. 10 lives each year to keep your power. Every time he thought about it, his stomach twisted. He could feel the pressure mounting, a heaviness that only grew worse as the days ticked by. Ezena rubbed his temples, muttering to himself. Why did I agree to this? As his fame spread, he'd seen the benefits of the deal, the packed pews, the donations, the influence, but now the cost of that fame was catching up to him. The cult had warned him. If he missed his yearly quota, there'd be consequences. He couldn't risk losing it all now. Yet, the pressure to choose his next targets was making him paranoid and careless. There was a knock on his door, and his assistant poked her head in. Pastor Ezena, you have visitors from Pastor Obina's group. They said it's urgent. Ezena's face tightened, but he forced a calm expression. Send them in. 3 men walked in, dressed in plain, dark clothes. Though they didn't look threatening, their faces were cold and expressionless. One of them, a tall man with a deep voice, broke the silence. Pastor Ezena, you're running out of time. Ezena nodded stiffly, trying to appear confident. I know. I have everything under control. The man raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. We don't think you do. The elders have noticed delays. You're still missing 3 more sacrifices to complete your quota. Ezena clenched his fists under the desk. I'll meet the quota. I've been handling things carefully. I don't want any suspicion. Careful? The man scoffed, a hint of a smirk crossing his face. We didn't bring you into this for you to be careful. We brought you in to get results. The elders have decided to place some of our own people in your church to help you with the process. What? Ezena's voice rose before he could control it. I don't need help. I can do this on my own. The man's smirk faded, replaced by a hard glare. You don't have a choice. Either you let our people in, or we'll find someone else who can handle it. Ezena swallowed, anger and fear churning inside him. He didn't want these strangers in his church, his inner circle. But he also knew he couldn't afford to lose his power, not when he'd come this far. Finally, he forced a nod. Fine, they can join the staff. Just keep them out of sight. The men exchanged glances, satisfied. They'll arrive tomorrow. Don't worry, Pastor Ezena. This is just to make things easier for you. But as they left, Ezena's heart sank. He felt like a puppet, his strings pulled by people he didn't trust, his control slipping more with each passing day. Across town, Kalu was busy following his own path. Ever since the sudden deaths of Ezena's congregation members, he hadn't been able to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He started quietly visiting the families of the victims, speaking with them to try and make sense of it all. One afternoon, Kalu sat down with Chinidu, the husband of one of Ezena's most recent miracle cases who died suddenly in a fire. Kalu leaned forward, his voice gentle but determined. Chinidu, can you tell me? Did your wife mention anything unusual after Pastor Ezena's prayer? Chinidu looked down, his hands twisting in his lap. She was so happy at first. She believed she'd been healed, that God had really touched her through Ezena. He paused, swallowing hard. But then, a few days later, she started feeling strange. She said it was like something was following her. Kalu's heart tightened. Did she say what she meant? Chinidu shook his head, his face pale. She just said she felt cold all the time, even in the sun. And then that night, his voice broke, tears filling his eyes. I don't understand, Pastor Kalu. Why would God heal her only to let her die like that? Kalu took a deep breath, feeling his anger and sadness mix. He placed a comforting hand on Chinidu's shoulder. I'm so sorry, Chinidu. I wish I had answers. But I promise, I'll keep looking until I understand what's happening. Leaving Chinidu's house, Kalu felt the weight of his suspicions grow heavier. It didn't make sense. Why would people supposedly healed by Izena end up dying so mysteriously? And why was there always this strange feeling of dread around his brother's church? That night, Kalu knelt by his bed, praying for guidance. Lord, please, show me what's going on. If there's darkness here, help me to see it clearly. As he prayed, an image flashed in his mind. An old, worn building on the edge of town, hidden away. Kalu gasped, realizing he'd seen that place before. It was a rundown shed behind Izena's house. He hadn't thought much of it in the past, but now, something about it felt important. Could that be where Izena? Kalu whispered to himself. He knew he had to find out. The next day, Izena was busy with his new staff. The cult members had arrived as promised, blending in with the rest of the church workers. Izena felt uneasy around them. They moved silently, spoke little, and carried an air of darkness that he couldn't ignore. But there was one man, Udo, who seemed to be their leader within the group. Udo had a way of watching Izena, his eyes piercing, as if he could see every doubt, every weakness. During a quiet moment, Udo approached him. Pastor Izena, I hear you're struggling to find more sacrifices. Izena stiffened, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. I don't need any reminders, Udo. I'll handle it. Udo gave a slow, mocking smile. The elders don't want promises. They want results. You've already disappointed them once by failing to offer your brother. Don't fail again. Izena's jaw clenched. My brother is not part of this. I told you I won't harm him. Udo shrugged, as if Izena's loyalty to Kalu was just a foolish whim. Suit yourself. But remember, the cult's patience has limits. If you can't deliver, they'll find someone else who can. And that won't end well for you. Izena forced himself to stay calm, but inside, panic was rising. He knew Udo was right. If he didn't complete his sacrifices, he'd lose everything and maybe more. That night, Kalu made his way to the shed he'd seen in his vision. It was late, and the streets were quiet as he slipped past Izena's house, moving through the shadows until he reached the back of the property. The shed was dark and quiet, but Kalu could feel an ominous presence around it. He took a deep breath, whispering a quick prayer for protection, and slowly pushed open the door. Inside, the smell of burnt incense filled his nose, and he saw strange symbols scrawled on the walls, symbols he didn't recognize. At the center of the floor lay an altar, covered with dark stains that looked suspiciously like dried blood. Kalu's stomach turned. What has Izena gotten himself into? He reached for a small charm lying on the altar, a charm he knew Izena's wife had once worn. The realization hit him like a blow. Izena had made a pact, a dark one that required blood, sacrifice, and the deaths of innocent people. Kalu stumbled back, his mind racing. He had suspected something was wrong, but this was beyond anything he'd imagined. Leaving the shed, he knew he had to confront Izena, but not without a plan. He needed to stop his brother before he caused more harm, but he also knew that this wasn't just about Izena anymore. The cult had its claws in him, and they wouldn't let him go easily. The next Sunday, Izena preached with a new intensity. His sermons were louder, his words more forceful, and his gaze sharper as he scanned the congregation, looking for his next target. The cult members had told him to condition his followers for sacrifice, to subtly prepare them for the idea that loyalty to the church sometimes required giving everything. We are called to be loyal, my friends. Izena's voice echoed through the hall. Loyalty and sacrifice. That is the foundation of true faith. The congregation murmured in agreement, their faces bright with faith. But Kalu, sitting in the back pew, listened with a heavy heart, recognizing the manipulation in his brother's words. After the service, Kalu waited for the crowd to thin out before approaching Izena. Brother, he called softly, approaching him at the pulpit. Izena turned, surprise flashing in his eyes before he quickly masked it. Kalu, what are you doing here? Kalu kept his voice low, his gaze steady. I know about the shed. I know what you're doing, Izena. Izena's face paled, but he forced a smile. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. Kalu's voice was firm, his disappointment clear. I saw the altar. I know you're making sacrifices. Tell me the truth. Why are you doing this? Izena's calm facade cracked, and his eyes filled with anger. Kalu, you don't understand. This is bigger than both of us. I've been blessed with power, influence. People listen to me now. I'm finally achieving what I was meant to. At what cost, Izena? Kalu shot back. Look around you. People are dying, innocent people. And for what? Fame? Money? Izena's face hardened. You don't get it. You never did. This is my calling, Kalu, my destiny. Sometimes sacrifices must be made. Kalu shook his head, his heart breaking. This isn't a calling, Izena. It's darkness. And you're letting it consume you. Izena glared at him, his voice cold. Stay out of my way, Kalu. This is my church, my life. Don't interfere. Kalu opened his mouth to argue, but Izena turned sharply, calling for his guards. They appeared instantly, blocking Kalu's path, their expressions hard and unyielding. Escort my brother out, Izena ordered, his voice steady but laced with anger. He's not welcome here anymore. Kalu stared at his brother one last time, a mixture of sadness and resolve in his eyes. I'll be praying for you, Izena. Even if you've given up on yourself, I won't. Izena didn't reply, and Kalu allowed himself to be led out, knowing that his fight had only just begun. Izena sat alone in his office, the faint ticking of the wall clock filling the room. Every minute that passed felt heavier. His heart pounded and his mind raced. He had never felt so trapped. Pastor Izena? A voice called from the doorway. It was Udo, the cult member who had become his assistant, if you could call it that. What is it? Izena snapped, feeling a strange chill run down his spine. Udo stepped in, his face as emotionless as ever. The elders are waiting for a report, Pastor. They are concerned about your delays. Izena clenched his fists. I know what they want. I'm working on it. Udo's mouth twitched slightly, a smirk barely hiding behind his straight face. Working on it isn't enough. They expect results. Izena, you're running out of time. Izena forced himself to keep calm. Even though every nerve in his body wanted to throw Udo out, he couldn't risk angering the cult. Not now. Not when they were watching his every move. Tell the elders I have everything under control. I'll meet the quota, Izena said, each word slow and controlled. Udo's smirk grew. I hope you do. Otherwise, Pastor, they will handle this their own way. And trust me, you don't want that. He glanced at Izena one more time before disappearing out the door. The second he was alone again, Izena slumped into his chair, his mind swirling. He needed 3 more sacrifices. Just 3. Yet it felt like the weight of the world was pressing down on him. If he failed, he knew the cult would destroy him without a second thought. He picked up his phone and dialed Chica's number, one of his most loyal followers. She'd been a regular at the church for years, always trusting him, always following his every word. Hello, Pastor. Chica's warm voice came through. Is everything all right? Yes, Chica. Everything is fine, he said, forcing a warmth he didn't feel. I wanted to see if you could come to the church tonight. I'd like to pray with you privately. Oh, Pastor, I'd be honored, she replied, her voice full of joy. Good, Izena said, his voice soft. I'll see you then. As he hung up, a pang of guilt hit him, sharper than before. He had known Chica for years. She trusted him. She didn't deserve this. But he reminded himself what was at stake. It's either her life or mine, he thought grimly. Across town, Kalu was in his small living room, surrounded by a handful of people. Some were members who had recently left Izena's church, their faces full of worry and doubt. Kalu had gathered them for prayer, feeling that a greater force was working against them. Kalu cleared his throat, looking around the circle. Thank you all for coming tonight. I know it's late, but I feel something urgent in my spirit. I believe God wants us to pray for protection. Chinidu, one of the men who had lost his wife, nodded, his face tense. "I don't know what's happening at that church, Pastor Kalu, but my spirit isn't at peace. It's like a dark shadow has fallen over us." Others murmured in agreement, fear and sadness clear in their eyes. They had all sensed the change in Ezena, the way his sermons had shifted from messages of hope to strange ideas about loyalty and sacrifice. Kalu nodded, his gaze steady. "That's why we're here. I believe something powerful, something dark is at work. But we're not powerless. Prayer is our weapon." Everyone bowed their heads, and Kalu led them in prayer, his voice filled with determination. "Father, we ask for your light to shine through the darkness surrounding us. Protect us from harm, and protect all those who trust in you. We ask for strength and courage." As they prayed, an odd sense of calm settled over the group. It was as if a barrier had formed around them, a shield against the darkness closing in on their lives. Chinidu raised his head, his eyes shining with hope. "Thank you, Pastor Kalu. I haven't felt this at peace in weeks." Kalu smiled, a warmth spreading through him. "God is with us. Whatever we face it together." Later that night, Chika arrived at Ezena's church, just as he'd asked. She entered the dimly lit sanctuary, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. "Pastor," she called, her voice soft. Ezena appeared from a side room, his expression calm but his heart racing. "Chika, thank you for coming. I just wanted to pray with you." Chika smiled, bowing her head respectfully. "Of course, Pastor. I'm always ready to pray." He led her to the small altar he'd prepared, the faint scent of incense filling the air. "Let's begin," he said, his voice low. He placed a hand on her shoulder, beginning a prayer, his words slow and intense. But as he spoke, something strange happened. Chika's face changed. She seemed to tense, her eyes narrowing slightly as if sensing something was wrong. "Pastor, something doesn't feel right," she whispered. Ezena tried to keep his composure. "It's just the spirit moving, Chika. Keep your heart open." But Chika's unease grew. She started to pray softly, her own words filling the air. And as she did, Ezena felt his own power weaken. It was as if her words were pushing him back, deflecting whatever he was trying to do. "No," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "This can't be happening." Chika's prayers grew louder, her eyes closed, her hands raised. "Father, I ask for your protection. Cover me with your blood. Shield me from any harm." Ezena tried to continue, tried to summon his strength, but her prayers created an unseen wall, one he couldn't break through. He stumbled back, feeling his control slip. "What's going on, Pastor?" Chika asked, opening her eyes and looking at him with a mixture of confusion and fear. Ezena quickly masked his frustration, forcing a smile. "It's nothing, Chika. You're just very powerful in prayer. I think that's enough for tonight." Chika nodded, her face still clouded with doubt. "Thank you, Pastor. I'll see you on Sunday." As she left, Ezena clenched his fists, his face twisted in rage. Kalu. It had to be him. Somehow, his brother's prayers were interfering with the ritual, weakening his power. This wasn't the first time Kalu's influence had disrupted him, and he was certain it wouldn't be the last. The following day, Ezena met with Udo, his frustration boiling over. "I need to speak with the elders," he said, barely containing his anger. Udo raised an eyebrow. "Why? The elders don't like unexpected visits. They need to know that my brother is meddling," Ezena replied, his voice hard. "His prayers are affecting the rituals. I need permission to deal with him directly." Udo's expression darkened, but he nodded. "I'll arrange a meeting. But remember, Pastor, the elders expect results. They won't tolerate excuses." Ezena bit back a retort, forcing himself to nod. "I understand. Just get me that meeting." Later that evening, he was summoned to a hidden location where the cult's elders met. The room was dim and filled with smoke, and the elders sat in shadow, their faces barely visible. "Pastor Ezena," one of them intoned, his voice deep and cold. "We've heard of your difficulties." Ezena took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "My brother, Kalu. He's interfering with my rituals. His prayers are disrupting the sacrifices." The elder was silent for a moment, then replied, "We warned you that your brother would be a problem. Yet you failed to offer him as the first sacrifice." Izena felt a surge of shame, but he quickly pushed it down. "I'm asking for permission to silence him, once and for all." The elder's voice was cold. "Your time for making demands has passed, Pastor Izena. You have failed too many times. But we are merciful. We'll give you one last chance. You must complete your quota by the end of the month. If you fail, we will remove you permanently." Izena's heart raced. He could feel their threat hanging in the air, chilling him to his core. I understand." The elder leaned forward, his face barely visible through the shadows. "Do not disappoint us again, Pastor. You have been warned." As Izena left, he felt a strange mix of fear and anger. He had no choice now. Either he met the cult's demands or he would lose everything, maybe even his life. His brother, he realized, had become his greatest enemy. And if he didn't find a way to deal with Kalu, he would never be able to complete his sacrifices. Meanwhile, Kalu continued his quiet resistance. Word had spread about his prayer meetings, and more people from Izena's church began attending, drawn by a sense of peace they hadn't felt in a long time. One evening, Chica joined Kalu's gathering, her face pale but determined. After the prayers, she pulled him aside. "Pastor Kalu," she whispered, glancing around nervously, "I think something strange is happening with Pastor Izena." Kalu's face softened. "Tell me, Chica, what have you seen?" Chica hesitated, her voice trembling. "Last night he called me to pray, but it felt wrong, like something was trying to harm me. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt like I was fighting something dark." Kalu's eyes darkened, his worst fears confirmed. "Thank you for telling me, Chica. Stay close to this group, all right? We'll pray for your protection." She nodded, relief filling her face. "Thank you, Pastor Kalu. I knew I could trust you." As she left, Kalu felt a sense of urgency growing within him. Izena was no longer just making strange choices, he was putting lives at risk. Kalu knew he couldn't stay silent any longer. His brother needed help, but he feared it might be too late to save him. Izena, meanwhile, sat alone in his darkened office, feeling the walls close in. He'd come too far to turn back now, but the cost was growing heavier each day. His mind drifted back to his and Kalu's early days in ministry, how they dreamed of changing lives together. How had things turned so wrong? He shook his head, clearing the thoughts. There was no room for regret now. The cult had made it clear, either he delivered his sacrifices, or they would take everything from him. He could not afford any more delays, and he certainly couldn't let Kalu stand in his way. But in the back of his mind, a quiet voice reminded him of the path he'd chosen, the darkness he'd embraced. For a brief moment, he wondered if it was too late to walk away, but that thought vanished as quickly as it had come, replaced by the burning desire to hold onto his power, no matter the cost. And as Izena planned his next steps, Kalu gathered his followers, preparing for the spiritual battle that he knew lay ahead. Both brothers, once close, now stood on opposite sides of a war they hadn't seen coming. A war that would soon come to a head, and neither was willing to back down. Izena walked out of the cult's headquarters, his hands trembling as he clutched the edges of his cloak. The ultimatum from the elders weighed heavily on his mind. He had only 2 more sacrifices left to complete the quota, and if he didn't succeed by the end of the month, they'd strip him of everything and maybe his life. He was pacing in his office when Udo entered, his footsteps quiet yet firm. "Pastor Izena," Udo began, his voice calm. "The elders want to know your progress." Izena gritted his teeth. "Tell the elders that I'll deliver. I'm close." Udo's cold eyes didn't blink. "Close isn't good enough. We don't care how you do it, Izena. Just get it done." Izena's fists tightened. "I know. Leave me. I need to think." Udo nodded but leaned in slightly before he left, his tone a whisper, dripping with threat. "Just remember, Pastor, there's no room for failure. For your sake, I hope you're serious." As Udo closed the door, Izena let out a shaky breath. He was running out of time, and Kalu was making things harder. Somehow, his brother's prayers kept disrupting his rituals. He had to finish this, and fast. He slumped into his chair, his mind racing. Then, as if by instinct, his thoughts drifted back to when he and Kalu had first opened their small churches. The nights they'd prayed together, the dreams they had of helping their community. Now, everything had changed, but he pushed those thoughts aside. There was no room for regret now. Kalu was deep in prayer when a sudden vision appeared in his mind. In it, he saw a dark, abandoned structure with strange markings, candles flickering in an eerie circle, and at the center was an altar. His heart raced as he recognized the place. "Dear God," he murmured, his voice trembling. "Is that where Izena performs his rituals?" He had heard of the shrine through rumors, but he never thought it would look this sinister. Taking a deep breath, he stood and gathered his closest followers, all of whom were ex-members of Izena's church who had sensed something wrong. "I saw it, everyone," Kalu announced, his voice steady. "The place where Izena performs his rituals. The shrine. I know where it is." A hush fell over the room. Chica looked up, fear and determination in her eyes. "Pastor Kalu, if you know where it is, we have to stop him." Kalu nodded, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. "Yes, but it won't be easy. We'll need strength, courage, and prayer." Chinedu, the widower, clenched his fists. "If Izena is truly behind all this, I won't just stand by and watch anymore. I'll help you, Pastor. We can't let him hurt anyone else." Kalu's heart warmed at their commitment, and he nodded. "We'll go together. But first, we must pray. We need all the protection we can get." That night, as Izena prepared for his final sacrifices, he felt a strange chill, a sense that something was drawing closer, like a storm about to break. He was in his office when one of his new assistants knocked on the door. Izena barely recognized this man, one of Udo's people, who had been planted in his church as an extra set of eyes and ears. "Pastor Izena, we have news," the man said, his voice steady and cold. "What is it?" Izena asked, trying to hide his irritation. The man stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Your brother. He's gathering people, preparing to come here. He knows about the shrine." Izena's heart skipped. "How?" he hissed, gripping the edge of his desk. "How could he know?" "Your brother is resilient. His prayers are strong. It's as if something is guiding him," the man replied. Izena's eyes narrowed. "I'll handle him myself. He thinks he can interfere, but he doesn't understand the power I have. Be careful, Pastor. The elders won't tolerate any more delays," the man reminded him before turning and leaving the room. Izena took a deep breath, feeling a strange, simmering anger toward Kalu. His brother had always been there, always pushing his faith, always standing in his way. It was time to end this. Meanwhile, Kalu gathered his group in the small clearing near the town's edge. It was late, and the night air was cold, thick with tension. Each face was set with determination, though fear lingered in their eyes. "Kalu?" Chica said softly, "Are you sure we're ready for this?" Kalu nodded, a calm yet fierce look in his eyes. "I know the risks, Chica, but God has shown us the way. We have to trust that He'll protect us." Chinedu stepped forward, his voice steady. "Whatever happens, Pastor, we're with you." Kalu took a deep breath, feeling the strength of their support. "Then let's go. We have to reach the shrine before Izena tries anything tonight." As they made their way through the darkened streets, Kalu kept praying silently, asking for guidance, for strength. Every step brought them closer to the heart of the battle, a confrontation that felt as much spiritual as physical. Back at the shrine, Izena was already preparing. The candles were lit, casting eerie shadows across the room. He paced, muttering incantations under his breath, ready to perform the final sacrifices that would secure his power. Suddenly, he felt a strange surge, as if something was approaching. He stopped, his breath catching. It was Kalu. He knew it. Turning, he saw Udo at the doorway. "Your brother is near, Izena. Are you prepared?" Izena clenched his fists, the anger building within him. I'll deal with him myself. No more interference. Udo gave a cold nod, his eyes narrowing. Do what you must. Just remember, the elders will be watching. As Udo left, Izena felt a wave of fear and anger. His own brother had become his enemy, someone who threatened everything he had worked so hard to achieve. As Kalu and his group approached the shrine, he paused, his heart racing. Wait, he said, turning to face the others. We need to pray once more. For protection, they gathered in a circle, their voices quiet but firm, calling on God's guidance and strength. Lord, we stand in your name. Protect us from any harm. Shield us from darkness. Kalu prayed, his voice trembling with emotion. When they finished, Kalu looked at each of them. Are you ready? Everyone nodded, their expressions determined. The shrine loomed ahead, hidden among the trees, dark and silent. Kalu felt a shiver run down his spine as they approached. The air was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. Kalu reached for the door and pushed it open, revealing the dimly lit room, with symbols drawn on the walls and an altar at the center, the candles casting long shadows. And there, standing by the altar, was Izena. Izena, Kalu said, his voice steady but filled with sorrow. It doesn't have to end like this. Come with us. Leave this darkness behind. Izena's eyes narrowed, a sneer forming on his lips. You don't understand anything, Kalu. You never did. I understand more than you think, Kalu replied. I know about the sacrifices, the deaths. You've gone too far, Izena. This isn't God's path. Izena's face twisted with rage. Don't you dare lecture me about God. You've always looked down on me, always tried to be the better brother. But look around. I have power, influence. People respect me. Respect built on fear and lies. Kalu shot back. Izena, this isn't you. You don't need this power. Come back to the truth. Izena laughed. A cold, bitter sound. The truth? The truth is that power is all that matters. Faith, prayer. Those are the tools of the weak. I am beyond that now. Chinidu, unable to hold back, stepped forward. People are dying because of you, Pastor Izena. My wife is dead because of you. Izena's face darkened, but he didn't respond. Kalu took a step forward, his hand outstretched. Please, brother. It's not too late. We can leave here, start over. Izena's eyes flickered. A hint of something, regret, perhaps, crossing his face. But it vanished quickly, replaced by cold determination. Leave? And give up everything? You don't understand. I'm too far gone. Kalu, there's no turning back. Then you're choosing this darkness over your own family? Kalu asked, his voice breaking. Izena's jaw tightened. Yes, I've made my choice, Kalu. Now leave before I'm forced to make you. Kalu shook his head, sadness filling his eyes. I can't leave, Izena. I won't let you destroy any more lives. If you won't turn back, then I'll end this myself. Izena's face twisted with anger, and he took a step toward Kalu, his voice low and menacing. I'd like to see you try. With that, he began to chant under his breath, his words dark and strange, filling the room with an eerie hum. The shadows seemed to grow, closing in around them, the temperature dropping. Kalu braced himself, calling out, Everyone, pray, now! They joined hands, their voices rising as they prayed, pushing back against the darkness closing in. Izena's face contorted with fury, his chant growing louder as he tried to overpower their prayers. But as their voices grew stronger, Izena felt his power weaken, the shadows retreating. He stumbled back, shocked, anger blazing in his eyes. This isn't over. Kalu! He shouted, his voice filled with rage and desperation. You think you've won, but you don't understand what you're up against. Kalu's gaze was steady. Maybe I don't understand at all, Izena. But I know this darkness has no real power against God. Izena sneered. We'll see about that. He turned and stormed out of the shrine, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Kalu and the others exchanged glances, relief and tension filling the room. Is it over? Chica whispered, her voice shaky. Kalu shook his head, his expression serious. No, he's not done. This was only the beginning. They stepped outside, watching as Azena disappeared into the night. They knew he would be back, stronger, more desperate. And when he returned, it would be a battle neither side would be able to avoid. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Write what you learned in the comments below. Here is another interesting story to watch. Click to watch now.